Listen, there's something you need to understand about the guys who've moved entire battalions under fire, planned convoy routes through hostile territory, and evacuated field hospitals and refugee camps while everything around them was burning or flooding or collapsing. They know which highways turn into parking lots, which bridges become death traps, and which routes will get you killed not by the disaster itself, but by the sheer crushing weight of every other person who had the exact same idea you did. When the order comes, hurricane, wildfire, earthquake, whatever, your brain defaults to the path of least resistance. You think major highway equals faster escape. You assume 6 lanes of interstate will save you. That single miscalculation puts you in a metal coffin crawling at half a mile an hour while whatever you're running from catches up. These veterans learned this the hard way, moving thousands under pressure. They think like water, finding cracks instead of crowds following signs. So let me walk you through the 8 highways that veterans who planned mass evacuations under combat and disaster conditions would never use. We're counting down from bad to catastrophic. By the time we hit number 1, you'll see the repeating pattern, the same failure modes that turn obvious routes into traps, and you'll know exactly which forgotten roads actually keep you moving. Number 8, US Route 1, the East Coast Shadow. Imagine you're stuck on US 1 in New Jersey. What should have been a 40-minute drive has already eaten 3 hours. The traffic light ahead is frozen red for 7 straight minutes. Horns are blaring. Someone 3 cars ahead gets out, waving their arms. Power's out to the whole intersection. Nobody knows who goes first, and the cross traffic is pushing in. Your kid in the back seat whispers, "Dad, I really have to go to the bathroom right now." And panic starts mixing with the sweat on your neck. The evacuation clock is ticking louder every second. Most people see US 1 as the smart alternate when I-95 clogs. That's exactly the problem. Everyone thinks that. It runs straight through city centers instead of around them, so you inherit hundreds of traffic lights that fail when grids overload. It crosses the same rivers as I-95, but on older, narrower bridges with lower weight limits and no emergency shoulders. Hurricane Sandy flooded long stretches because the road hugs sea level through coastal towns. People who bailed from I-95 thinking they'd found salvation ended up in the same gridlock with worse infrastructure. Veterans who ran disaster relief operations swear by inland state routes instead. Virginia's Route 17, Maryland's Route 301, roads that locals use daily and that don't pretend to be major arteries. US 1 is dangerous precisely because it masquerades as the obvious Plan B. It buys you false hope until the real bottleneck hits. Number 7, Interstate 80 through the Sierra Nevada. Imagine you're stuck on I-80 eastbound out of Sacramento in November during a wildfire evacuation. You've been making decent time for an hour when the temperature suddenly drops. Rain turns to sleet, then heavy snow. Brake lights cascade ahead like falling dominoes. Traffic grinds to a complete stop at 5,000 feet. You're wedged between 2 big rigs with nowhere to maneuver. Your phone shows a jackknife truck blocking Donner Pass 15 miles ahead. Estimated clearance? Unknown. Outside temperature reads 28 degrees and falling fast. Fuel sits at half a tank. Your mind races. Do you keep the engine idling for heat and risk running dry? Or shut it off and freeze while your family shivers in the back seat? The core issue is specific sections that become total kill zones. Donner Pass climbs over 4,000 feet through terrain famous for sudden, deadly weather, and it's often the only viable route for hundreds of miles in any direction. Any Bay Area evacuation, earthquake, wildfire, you name it, slams straight into it. One multi-vehicle pileup in whiteout conditions, and the entire line behind it halts for hours or days. Veterans who planned military convoy operations in harsh terrain take Highway 50 through South Lake Tahoe instead. Farther east, US 50 turns into the loneliest road in America across Nevada. During an evacuation, lonely is exactly what keeps you alive. Crowded roads become graveyards. Number 6, Interstate 75 through Florida. Here's where you start seeing the deadly pattern that repeats on every major interstate that funnels millions through a narrowing geographic bottleneck. I-75 is the primary escape route for the entire Florida peninsula, channeling people from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, and the densely packed southern half of the state straight towards Georgia. Southern end wide open with population, northern end squeeze into a single corridor. Pure physics guarantees it will fail under load. During Hurricane Irma in 2017, normal 4-hour drives stretched into 18 to 20-hour nightmares. Gas stations along the route ran bone dry and stayed that way for days. A typical highway station holds only 20,000 to 30,000 gallons total across all grades. 1,000 cars, each needing 15 gallons, burns through 15,000 gallons in a single surge. Once empty, tanker trucks can't reach them because the highway is locked in both directions. Between Ocala and Valdosta, there's almost nothing, just pine forests and swamp. Break down there with your family and you're waiting for help that isn't coming. Every tow truck and emergency crew is already overwhelmed beyond capacity. Veterans who worked hurricane relief operations refuse to touch I-75. They run Florida's Turnpike combined with US 301 and US 441 through quieter rural counties. Small-town stations serve 100 locals a day instead of thousands of panicked evacuees, so they stay functional far longer. Number 5. Interstate 15 between Southern California and Las Vegas. This highway kills you with environment more than traffic volume. I-15 cuts across the Mojave Desert through Barstow and Baker, and even on a normal summer weekend, it's bumper to bumper with Vegas-bound traffic crawling through 110-degree heat. At a major LA earthquake, regional wildfire, or sudden Vegas panic, it turns lethal before you realize what's happening. Temperatures regularly hit 115 degrees. Gridlock forces engines to overheat. Running the air conditioner means constant idling that drains fuel at an alarming rate. Long stretches offer zero services, zero water, zero shade. You sit trapped in a metal box on black asphalt, radiating heat, while the interior climbs towards 130, then 140 degrees. Kids in the back are crying from the heat and fear. Your engine temperature gauge edges into the red. You face the brutal choice: keep the AC running and burn what little gas remains, or crack the windows and let in air that feels like an open furnace. People strand here and heat stroke sets in within hours, not days. The mountain pass before Vegas adds another brutal bottleneck where trucks slow dramatically and traffic compresses into a single choking point. Veterans who ran desert operations and understand heat casualty rates avoid I-15 completely in any crisis. They cut across on Highway 58 or take US 95 north and Route 127, even straight through Death Valley. Because an empty road through harsh terrain you prepared for beats being trapped on a gridlocked highway where the environment itself is trying to cook you alive. Number 4. Interstate 405 through Los Angeles. The 405 is already infamous for turning into a parking lot on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. During a real emergency, it becomes far worse, a psychological trap that reveals exactly why smart people keep making fatal route choices. Traffic psychologists call it herding behavior. When stress clouds your thinking, you follow the crowd. You assume that if everyone else is piling onto the 405, it must be the right move. You trust the visible mass of cars as collective wisdom. But crowds in disasters aren't wise. They're panicked and working from the exact same limited information. Every GPS app routes people onto the same major highways based on normal traffic algorithms, not evacuation reality. The feedback loop makes the worst routes exponentially worse. The 405 collects dump-ins from I-10, I-105, US 101, and the 118 at multiple interchanges. The Sepulveda Pass through the Santa Monica Mountains becomes the final concentrator, a long grade surrounded by dense urban development with almost no exits and shoulders too narrow to matter. You're trapped with 50,000 other drivers who all had the identical bad idea.
Then sunk cost fallacy kicks in. Veterans who commanded convoy operations see it constantly. After sitting 2 hours, you hesitate to bail. I've already invested this time. Exiting now wastes everything. Those hours are already lost. The only question that matters is what choice gets your family safe from this exact moment forward. The people who planned real mass evacuations skip the 405 entirely and take surface streets like Sepulveda Boulevard or the winding Topanga Canyon Boulevard. 25 miles per hour that actually keeps moving beats a highway promising 65 and delivering 0 every single time. And what happens when that same herding instinct collides with an entire mountain range full of water crossings and single bridges? The next one gets ugly fast. Number 3. Interstate 10 across the Gulf Coast. Let me paint you a picture of what I-10 actually looks like during a Gulf hurricane evacuation, because this is where theory dies and raw panic takes over. It's 3 in the morning. You've been on the road 6 hours and covered maybe 40 miles total. Fuel gauge sits below a quarter tank. The kids are crying in the back seat from exhaustion and fear. Your phone is almost dead because the battery pack gave out an hour ago and every cell tower is overloaded. The AC is barely fighting because traffic is mostly stop and your engine temperature is steadily climbing into the danger zone. In the rear view, you can still see the glow of the city you fled. Ahead stretches an endless river of red taillights that hasn't moved in 20 minutes. Your mind races. How much fuel is truly left? Enough to idle here 3 more hours? 5? What if you need to divert suddenly? What if the next station is already stripped clean? Will your kid panic if the bridge ahead starts shaking in the wind? This is I-10, the primary evacuation artery for every Gulf hurricane evacuation, running from Florida through Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and into Texas. It crosses water constantly. The long bridge over Mobile Bay, the twin spans over Lake Pontchartrain outside New Orleans, elevated sections through the Louisiana swamps. These aren't ordinary bridges. They are single-point bottlenecks where all traffic funnels down and capacity collapses. Shut one, and the entire highway loses half or more of its flow. Contraflow sounds brilliant in planning meetings. Reverse every lane outbound to double capacity. In reality, it demands perfect coordination that never arrives. It also seals off every exit ramp on one side. Overheat, run out of gas, or your child gets carsick and you instantly block an entire lane with no place to pull over. Katrina proved how badly it creates confusion. Drivers missed exits, emergency vehicles couldn't weave through reversed lanes, and accidents paralyzed whole sections for hours. You end up stuck on a bridge, concrete barriers trapping you on both sides, unable to turn around, listening to the radio as storm surge predictions keep rising while your car sits motionless. Veterans who ran actual FEMA and military hurricane relief operations take U.S. Highway 90, the old coastal route their grandparents drove. It's slower and only 2 or 3 lanes in most places, but it offers constant exit options, working gas stations, and room to adapt when plans break. While everyone else sits locked on I-10 watching their fuel gauges drop to 0, you make steady, quiet progress on the forgotten road. Number 2. Interstate 5 along the West Coast. You're seeing the pattern clearly now. Major interstate, tight geographic funnel, one critical kill zone that collapses everything. I-5 is the West Coast embodiment of every failure we've covered. Running from the Mexican border all the way to Canada, civilians assume it will save them when the big earthquake finally hits or wildfire smoke turns the sky orange. It won't. The Central Valley looks wide open on a map until you realize mountains on one side and hills on the other squeeze it for hundreds of miles. Every major city, LA, Bakersfield, Fresno, Sacramento, dumps its traffic onto the same northbound lanes during an evacuation. The Grapevine section through Tejon Pass is where the entire system dies. This steep mountain climb tops 4,000 feet. Bridges and passes are rated for vehicles per hour only when traffic maintains speed and spacing. In real evacuations, drivers slow down, follow too closely, and brake unpredictably. That single change cuts effective throughput by 30 to 50%. Clearing 100,000 vehicles that should take 25 hours under perfect conditions stretches into 35 to 40 hours when panic sets in. And that math assumes 0 accidents, 0 breakdowns, 0 stalled trucks. The pass itself guarantees mechanical failure. Steep grades cook engines, burn out brakes, and cause poorly maintained vehicles to fail in waves. One stalled semi blocks thousands behind it. In a wildfire evacuation, the pass fills with thick smoke, dropping visibility to near 0 while terrified drivers crawl tight turns at walking speed.
When I-10 transforms into a graveyard of overheated cars and stranded families, Highway 99 keeps moving. It runs parallel through the same valley but passes directly through small towns instead of bypassing them. Those towns mean working gas stations, side roads for detours, and real options. It isn't trying to be the fastest route. It's built to stay resilient when everything else breaks. That's the difference that saves lives. Number 1. Interstate 95, the East Coast killer. This is the worst evacuation route in America. I-95 combines every single failure mode we've discussed and multiplies it by the highest population density corridor on the continent. Running 1,900 miles from Maine to Florida, it funnels through Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Richmond, every major population center. 10 lanes suddenly squeeze to 3 at bridges, tunnels, and complex merges. Each squeeze point becomes a deadly bottleneck where traffic compresses and dies. Over 50 million people live inside this corridor. In any regional crisis, hurricane, nuclear incident, or major earthquake, a huge percentage will default to I-95 inside the same narrow 6-hour window simply because it's the biggest, most obvious highway they know. Add the critical single-point failures, Fort McHenry Tunnel in Baltimore, Delaware Memorial Bridge, the nightmare approach to George Washington Bridge, the sharp, narrow curve through Providence. Under normal traffic, they cause backups. Under evacuation pressure, they become complete blockages that last days. Hurricane Floyd in 1999 turned I-95 in Florida into what engineers call a static queue, a professional term for a parking lot that doesn't move for 18 straight hours. People ran out of gas while sitting still. Engines overheated and died. Drivers abandoned vehicles and began walking between lanes, which blocked emergency services even worse. Worst of all, for long stretches, there are almost no usable parallel routes. US 1 is already a trap we covered. From Richmond to Boston, you are effectively committed once you're on it. And commitment during an evacuation is death. Let me show you exactly what that looks like so you never forget it. You left 6 hours after the mandatory order because you had to secure the house, pack important documents, and convince your elderly father it was time to leave. Now you're somewhere in North Carolina on I-95. Darkness is falling, you've covered only 11 miles in 4 hours. The fuel light came on 30 minutes ago and the next exit is 2 miles ahead according to the sign, but you haven't moved an inch. Your phone died long ago because every driver on the highway is frantically calling family and the cell towers are completely overloaded. Your daughter in the back seat keeps asking in a small voice when you'll finally reach grandma's house, and you have no honest answer left. The radio announcer says the hurricane has strengthened to Category 4 and is now expected to make landfall 6 hours earlier than first predicted. You do the desperate math in your head. You're still 200 miles from safety. At this crawling pace, the storm will overtake you long before you get there. You won't even be close. What do you do now? You can't turn around. There's a solid wall of vehicles stretching to the horizon behind you. You can't exit. You're nowhere near a ramp, and every other driver has the same desperate idea. You're trapped, committed, and whatever you're fleeing is closing in fast. That's I-95. That's the exact nightmare scenario veterans who planned mass casualty evacuations and civilian disaster relief operations warn about. Nobody listens until it's their own family trapped in it. Alternate routes do exist. Combinations of US 13 through Delaware and Maryland, Route 301 cutting well inland, various state roads that never promise speed but reliably deliver actual movement. You must know them cold before the first evacuation notice drops. You must commit early before the decision window slams shut. The single concept that separates people who survive from those who don't is the decision window. There's a narrow gap after you personally know you must leave, but before the masses act on the same information. That window might be 6 hours. It might be only 2. Official government orders always lag behind the real situation on the ground. Veterans monitor the raw data themselves. Earthquake sensors, live hurricane tracks, fire perimeter maps, they make the call and move while highways still flow freely.